Perseus had been trying to live a quiet life, or at least as quiet as anyone with a father on Mount Olympus and a past full of blood can manage, when the world decided that quiet was for mortals who'd lost their nerve. He's introduced as a strong, stubborn man who's done his best to bury the past, a former soldier and fisherman raised by humans, carrying the guilt and grief of a life tormented by violence he never wanted to be part of. He wants to be anonymous, he wants to be left alone, but destiny, of course, ignores polite requests. The film opens with flashbacks to Perseus's origin. Born a demigod because Zeus intervened in mortal affairs, shame and secrecy followed his mother and him. He was given to simple folk to raise, but the gods' games never stay in the background. We meet him as someone who's tried to protect what little he has, a family, a modest life, and we feel for the man who keeps getting pulled back into the violence he hoped to leave behind. The mortality of humans and the caprice of gods are set up early on. Zeus, all fatherly thunder and shaken lightning, is portrayed as powerful but distant. Hades, full of bitterness and shadows, is the one who slips his blade into the cracks of trust and plots in the dark. Hades resents Zeus and the other gods for their choices, and his anger has consequences for ordinary people. As the gods withdraw their protection after a complicated series of betrayals and bargains among the immortals, the human kingdoms are suddenly exposed to horrors that had been kept at bay for centuries. With the gods' favor removed, sea monsters, storms, and the cruelty of mortals themselves begin to overwhelm the cities. Argos, a proud kingdom led by Queen Cassiopeia, chooses to worship false security over humility, and Cassiopeia's vanity and political desperation prepare the ground for the tragedy that follows. She brags about her daughter's beauty and angers forces that will not let vanity slide, which is a classic fictional move that never ends well. The real spark, though, is the bargain that seals Andromeda's fate. Cassiopeia's people are terrified. The king and queen make a desperate deal with their conqueror to keep their city alive. Andromeda, the beautiful daughter, is offered as a sacrifice to the Kraken, a world-ending sea monster with tentacles like towers and a hunger like a policy debate. Enter Perseus again, reluctantly. He's drawn back into the fray both by duty and by the fact that Andromeda, who you'd think is a bit of a damsel, proves to be brave, decisive, and more complicated than a sash and a fainting couch. She is not just a prize. She becomes the person Perseus has to actually care about saving, because it matters, not because it's a plot convenience. Before Perseus can charge the beach with a sword and some righteous fury, the twist. The only thing that will stop the Kraken is the head of Medusa, the Gorgon whose gaze turns people to stone. Retrieving Medusa's head is no small weekend errand. It's a mission that forces Perseus to confront gods, monsters' betrayal, and his own complicated heritage. He assembles a ragtag crew. Some are soldiers, some are thieves, some are bitter companions, and they set out on a journey that's part mythic quest, part road trip with worse cuisine. Along the way, Perseus meets Io, a mysterious woman who is both a guide and a living breadcrumb trail of divine history. Io is fascinatingly stuck between worlds, cursed yet timeless, bitter yet oddly lighthearted, and she becomes a companion who reminds Perseus of the price of God's immortality. There's also Agenor and a handful of other allies who bring muscle and sarcasm in equal measure. They bicker, they lose comrades, they narrowly escape death more times than a cat with 9 lives and a poor sense of judgment. The crew's search takes them into the underworld-adjacent places where the rules of physics are optional and logic checks its luggage. And they come face to face with creatures and phenomena that are designed to be visually impressive and narratively significant. Towering beasts, treacherous landscapes, and the Stygian underbelly that looks like someone forgot to pay the cleaning bill on fate. One memorable sequence, yes, the one everyone remembers, has Perseus and his team confronting the Grae, the 3 blind sisters who share one eye and one tooth, and who are both creepy and oddly efficient. Perseus's approach there is impulsive and clever, and it's one of the moments where his character shows the blend of desperation and resourcefulness that defines him. The trip culminates in the lair of Medusa, a scene that pulls the crew into darkness and terror. Medusa in this version is monstrous and tragic, a creature cursed and trapped in herself, not just a monster for spectacle, but also a symbol of divine cruelty. Perseus, clever as ever and just a little reckless, manages to incapacitate her and take her head. That moment is visually striking and narratively heavy. It's not just a trophy, it's proof of the moral ambiguity of the god's world. Using the head to turn the Kraken to stone is the plan, and the return trip to Argos is tense because the world outside is falling to pieces. Back in Argos, the political landscape has shifted. Cassiopeia's attempts to save her kingdom by sacrificing her child have not only failed to keep the gods placated but have made her look desperate and small. Andromeda, for her part, refuses to be a passive piece on the chessboard. She has agency and ambition, and watching her navigate that situation gives the story some real emotional weight. Perseus arrives with a weapon that should be the salvation of the city, But nothing in a story like this goes smoothly. The Kraken is unleashed amid thunder and ruin. The city braces for the end. The spectacle of the monster dragging buildings and people out to sea is bleak and thrilling. It's a test of how much destruction a society can tolerate before it decides to stand or fall. Perseus's confrontation with the Kraken is part brute force and part ingenuity. He uses Medusa's head to turn the beast into stone, which is satisfyingly mythological and visually definitive. But the climax is not just about monsters, it's also about gods. Hades reveals himself as the architect of much of the cruelty, and his motives are bitter and personal. He feels betrayed by Zeus and wants to reclaim power through human suffering. Perseus has to face the consequences of divine rivalry while also making choices that affect real people. There's a fight, there's sacrifice, and there's the emotional cost of victory. The gods aren't paragons here. They're complicated, fallible, and sometimes cruel, a theme that keeps the movie grounded despite the cosmic spectacle. The battle sequences are cinematic and loud, but the emotional center is Perseus himself. He starts the film trying to bury his past and ends it with a clearer understanding of who he is and what he stands for. He chooses humanity over immortality in very real ways, not necessarily by renouncing his heritage in a line of dialogue, but by the things he does, the people he saves, and the alliances he forges. Andromeda grows from a political pawn into a leader, and Perseus's relationship with her feels earned because they both change and learn to rely on each other. Io, meanwhile, remains a haunting figure who knows more than she lets on, and who ultimately acts as a reminder that immortality has a price tag no one wants to pay. There's also a neat moment where Zeus, thunder and all, is forced to acknowledge the mess his family created. The film doesn't give the gods a free pass, and it uses their infighting to underline a fundamental idea. When immortals play games with mortal lives, the results are messy and devastating. Hades gets his moments of shadow play vengeance. Zeus acts like the heavy guilt dad who must do something about it, and the humans caught in between have to make do with courage and quick thinking. The resolution ties up most threads without pretending everything is perfect. Argos is saved from total annihilation, but the cost is clear. People have died, political systems have shifted, and the gods have been shown to be neither unquestionable saviors nor unmitigated villains. Perseus ends up in a place of reluctant acceptance of who he is with Andromeda at his side, planning a future that will involve both the messy human world and the shadowy oversight of Olympus. The film leaves room for hope and for the idea that the next generation of leaders might choose differently than the last, a fairly decent note to end on after a long, noisy conflict. If there's one consistent beat through all this chaos, it's a human one. Perseus's growth from a man trying to hide into someone who acts when it counts. The movie is heavy on spectacle, giant monsters, divine temper tantrums, and big splashy set pieces, but its most rewarding moments are the little human choices. A soldier choosing to stay and fight rather than run, a princess refusing to be a sacrifice, a cursed woman offering guidance to someone who needs it. There's humor sprinkled in, usually the weary, sarcastic kind that keeps the tragedy from drowning every scene. The film wants you to feel both awe at the mythic scale and real empathy for the characters who populate it. So, bottom line, Clash of the Titans is a myth retold for big screen thrills with a core that's not afraid to admit the gods are jerks and the humans are stubborn in the best way. Perseus's journey is about accepting who you are and using whatever you've been given, divine or mortal, to try and make the world a little better. It's